A new report out from the Wall Street Journal saying that Huawei had access to as much as $75 billion in state support from the Chinese government, including loans, grants, and tax breaks. Huawei responding to that article, calling it based on false information. Joining us right now to talk about this regulation and so much more. A company that's probably been one of the biggest stories in the news, in the business world at least, and geopolitically over the past year. Andy Purdy, Chief Security Officer at Huawei. Good morning to you.
Thank you. Good morning.
So let's talk about this article, which I know the company believes is false, but the idea that the company has effectively been subsidized by the government. You say it's false. Why?
Well, when you see the kind of information that the government gave to the Wall Street Journal for this story, you understand why some of the politicians in this country have such a negative view of Huawei, that we have to try to make sure that we base things on the facts. And one of the reasons we want to talk with the U.S. government is so that we can talk about what the facts are. The fact is, and you saw in that article that They said Cisco has like $45 billion in assistance. Mm-hmm. The number $75 billion for us is drastically overstated. The fact is, their lines of credit MOUs were issued between 2005 and 2011, and we gave this information to the House Intelligence Committee. And a tiny fraction of that was ever used for loans from customers. So to take the gross figure of the credit lines is really not fair to talk about that as being assistance from the government.
Why? But why should the credit lines not be considered assistance from the government? Is Cisco, I get that Cisco and others get tax subsidies and other things, but they don't get lines of credit from the government.
Well, we didn't get the lines of credit from the government.
The lines of banks, but yeah.
The lines of credit were made available by the banks to customers. So then the question was, are customers going to take advantage of the lines of credit to buy our equipment? And what we're saying is a tiny fraction of the 40-some billion they're talking about was actually used to buy our equipment.
But it's your equivalent of the Exim Bank. I mean, if your customers are able to take out lines of credit and it's there, why did it exist if you didn't need it?
But the point is, it's a tiny amount. When you look at the amount of investment in our company over that period of time, it was less than like $3 billion was used to purchase our products. So when you're looking at like $175 billion in purchases, $3 billion in purchases supported by lines of credit is a minor issue.
Let me ask you about the larger issue. We're in the midst of this trade deal. First of all, do you have any insight, directly or indirectly, into what is in the Phase 1 trade deal when it comes to IP protection and security issues that may very well relate to your company?
No, but I think in terms of everything that matters to our country, those kinds of provisions have to be in there. And as I discussed at the United Nations here in early December, having objective ways that folks can see whether there's theft of intellectual property, forced technology transfer, those are critical to all of us. So I hope those things are going to be in the agreement.
Andy, you realize you work for Huawei, and they've blatantly ripped off and stolen all kinds of intellectual property, where it's very obvious they've done it. You know, the statements sometimes and the stuff you've ripped off, it's been directly there, the existing company's information on that. I mean, it sounds nice for you to say these things, but Huawei has been one of the worst transgressors of stealing intellectual property. So it sounds a little hollow coming from a Huawei representative.
Well, and actually, that's not true. When you look at the facts of the decades of litigation brought by companies and against companies, numerous companies have been involved in these issues.
Okay, so your point is other people are really bad at this too. Other companies are really bad at this, but Huawei has been a prime offender of ripping off intellectual property.
I understand that's your position. I understand that's the position of the U.S. government. That's not the facts. When you look at the objective information and you analyze those cases and you look at the fact that no court has ordered us to pay a penalty,
the Wall Street Journal has
agreements that are under MOU, there was no settlement. There was no money paid.
The Wall Street Journal has gone through and chronicled where you guys have completely ripped off stuff, and it still has the company you ripped it off from in the stuff that you're selling. Like, it still has their information and their headers in it.
There are instances.
Are you saying that hasn't happened?
There are instances of wrongdoing by us and other companies, and any instance of that is wrong. I'm saying when you conflate it to be this gigantic thing, that's not true. It's just not true.
I disagree based on what I've read and based on what I've seen. So, and your idea of what's wrong and how much it is, like, okay, you quantify it for me. If you're telling me I'm wrong and how I'm quantifying this, explain to me when it's happened and when it hasn't.
Well, I'm saying that there is a record of litigation around the world and involving numerous companies where there have been settlements. Our action in filing for patents, and we've spent $6 billion in purchasing the rights of other people's patents around the world, cross-licensing deals. We are invested in,
Let me ask you a question.
in the patent protection.
So there's two issues.
At this point.
There's two issues. One is the intellectual property issue, which you guys just sparred about. And then there's the national security issue. The first, just to end the conversation on intellectual property for a moment, what are the things you think that the company has explicitly done, let's say in the past 3 years? Because I recognize a lot of the stuff that was accounted for in the Wall Street Journal took place oftentimes 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but where you've implemented significant changes in the way the company even operates.
Well, we have implemented very dramatic programs for cybersecurity assurance across our entire supply chain.
I'm not talking about cybersecurity. I'm talking about intellectual property. Meaning, I have yet to. One of the reasons why I, to some degree, side with Becky on this is that I have yet to hear Huawei explicitly say, you know what, there's a problem. Maybe other companies have the same problem we have, if that's what your position is, but there's a problem, and we want to fix it. We think it's wrong. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Internally, we have put X, Y, and Z into place in our company to change the way we behave going forward.
I think that's a great suggestion, to be more transparent about exactly what we are doing. What we see internally with the kinds of internal compliance we've talked about before, right, that the United States is great on, the ethics and compliance programs, we're doing those things internally. So we have the internal publication, the internal training, the internal testing, the sanctioning of employees that do wrongdoing. Right. We see the example of Ericsson. Right. There are a lot of companies out there that have to tighten up, but you make a good point.
We're going to run out of time, but on national security, is there anything that you think, do you ever say to yourself, if I could just do this, either with my boss or with the Chinese government, I could persuade the world that we're not a national security threat? What would that be?
It would be to get the European Union and Germany to sign on to standards and testing by independent, verifiable organizations to demonstrate that no products have been tainted. No products have backdoors implanted, and that needs to be done for all products.
Okay. Andy, it is a larger conversation. We do hope to have you back. We always appreciate your candor and your interest in having this dialogue. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Happy holidays.